"Excuse me," the assistant branch manager said, raising her voice just enough for the room to hear. "But accounts of that size usually belong to long-term clients, not walk-ins with questionable documentation. We need to verify that you didn't stumble in here with someone else's information. Please don't take this the wrong way, but fraud is common these days, especially with cases like yours." Before we dive in, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country below. If you've ever been judged before saying a word, hit like. And if you believe dignity beats status, subscribe for more true stories that expose real power. Now, let's rewind. 15 minutes before that moment shook the lobby. It was just after 11:40 a.m. on a Tuesday in July when Vanessa Harper stepped into the Lincoln Heights branch of Dominion Bank in Atlanta. She wasn't dressed to impress anyone. Her navy blue blouse was clean but simple, tucked neatly into high-waisted slacks, black flats, a brown leather crossbody bag, and not a single piece of jewelry. Her natural curls were tied back, and she wore no makeup. To the average onlooker, she could have been a local business owner, a school administrator, or even someone looking to apply for her first line of credit. But what no one knew, at least not yet, was that Vanessa was the CEO of Apex Financial Group, one of the fastest-growing investment firms in the Southeast, and she had arrived unannounced for a quiet wire transfer. No entourage, no name drop, no warning, just her and a business test worth $450,000. She wanted to see, firsthand, how her company's partnered institutions were treating customers who didn't look like they fit the profile. Vanessa walked calmly to the front desk. She had already scheduled her appointment online, but still took a printed ticket out of habit. Number 216. There were a few others in the lobby. A white couple chatting at the counter, a teenage boy in a hoodie waiting to cash a check, and a middle-aged black man in a charcoal suit seated in the corner. Quietly observing, Vanessa approached the front desk with a polite smile. "Hi there. I'm here for an appointment with account services. Vanessa Harper." The woman at the reception, Cheryl Madsen, a white teller in her early 30s, didn't smile, didn't look up. She kept typing, as if Vanessa had interrupted something important. Finally, without meeting her eyes, Cheryl muttered, "Just take a seat. Someone will call you when they're ready." Vanessa nodded slowly, then glanced toward the seating area. She noticed that the white couple who had just walked in, without an appointment, were already being escorted to a private window. So were two other customers after them. 10 minutes passed, then 15. Vanessa checked her phone. Her appointment time had long come and gone. She got up, walked back to the desk, and asked softly, "I believe I had a 11:45 scheduled with the assistant manager. Deborah Lynch?" Cheryl barely turned her head. "She's busy. You'll need to wait." Vanessa inhaled calmly. "I understand, but I've been here since 11:40, and others have gone ahead of me. I just want to confirm I'm still being seen." At that moment, Deborah Lynch stepped out from the side office, tall, sharp-voiced, and clipped in both tone and posture. She eyed Vanessa from head to toe. Once, slowly, then called out, "Are you the one asking about an appointment?" Vanessa nodded. "Yes, Vanessa Harper." Deborah folded her arms. "And what kind of account are we dealing with here?" Vanessa raised an eyebrow. "It's a business account. I'm here to authorize a wire transfer." Deborah tilted her head, voice tightening. "And how much are we talking?" $450,000. The lobby seemed to pause for a second. Deborah smirked. "Uh-huh. And where exactly did those funds come from?" Vanessa's voice remained calm. "Their company reserves, all fully documented." Cheryl suddenly leaned forward, whispering something into Deborah's ear. Whatever it was. Deborah's expression soured. She stepped closer to Vanessa and said, in a louder voice now. "Ma'am, this isn't the kind of account you'd normally have access to. Are you sure you're in the right bank?" Several customers looked up. The man in the corner, the black man in the suit, quietly pulled out his phone. Another customer, a Latino man near the exit, crossed his arms and frowned. Vanessa took a breath. "Yes, this is Dominion Bank. I scheduled this appointment a week ago. I have the paperwork." Deborah held out a hand but didn't take the documents when Vanessa extended them. "Look, we've had issues before. People walk in claiming big balances, fake names, fake businesses. We're not saying that's you, but we do need to verify everything thoroughly. You'll have to wait." "Again?" Vanessa's jaw tightened, but she nodded. "Fine. I'll wait." She stepped back, returned to her seat, and texted a single word. "Recording." 15 feet away, Brian Cole, her undercover security detail, received the message, though no one would have guessed he was working for her. From where he sat, he had a full view of the front desk, the manager's office, and the two tellers whispering near the printer. Another 10 minutes passed. A full half hour since Vanessa walked in. Still no service. Still no apology. And the worst? Deborah was now pointing at Vanessa while whispering to a man in a navy suit who had just walked out of the manager's office. Jason McNeil, the branch manager himself. Jason glanced at Vanessa, leaned in, and asked one question loud enough for Brian to hear. "She doesn't look like someone with that kind of money. You sure this isn't a scam?" That was the moment everything changed. Vanessa didn't flinch when she heard it. "She doesn't look like someone with that kind of money." But her spine straightened just slightly, the way a tree hardens against the first gust of a storm. Across the room, Brian Cole kept his eyes on the manager, his phone angled low on his knee. Already recording, Jason McNeil, the branch manager, leaned against the counter with an air of casual arrogance, like he'd made this judgment before, more than once. He and Deborah exchanged a knowing glance, and then Jason approached. "Ms. Harper," he said, resting his hand on the edge of the desk like he was preparing to deliver bad news. "You're requesting a wire transfer for $450,000. That's a highly irregular amount for a walk-in client." Vanessa kept her voice measured. "It's not irregular if it's pre-scheduled and verified, which I did. A week ago." Jason clicked his tongue and nodded slowly. "Right. But we have security protocols. You understand? We've had incidents. And sometimes people come in claiming to represent companies they don't actually work for." The implication hung heavy in the air. Vanessa stared at him. "You think I'm impersonating someone?" Jason forced a smile. "Let's just say we want to be extra cautious. If you wouldn't mind stepping into the back room, we can verify your identity more thoroughly." Vanessa didn't move. "No, I'll verify everything right here, publicly. If I'm being accused of something, say it out loud." Jason raised his eyebrows. "No one said anything about accusations. We just need to be sure." Behind Vanessa, customers were listening more closely now. The man in the charcoal suit, Marcus Green, was still recording. Luis Hernandez, the Latino man by the lobby door, frowned and took a step forward. "Man, I just saw two white guys walk in here with a check and no ID, and they got offered coffee. Now this lady's being told to go to a back room?" Jason ignored him. "This isn't about race," he said, trying to sound sincere but failing to hide the edge in his voice. "It's about procedure." Vanessa nodded. "Good. Then show me the procedure that requires a manager and a guard to verify a transfer that was already approved online." At that moment, Deborah waved to the security guard, Trent Wallace, who began walking toward them. He was tall, white, and built like someone who still believed physical presence meant authority. Ma'am, Trent said, his voice deep and dismissive. I need you to come with me. Vanessa turned to him. Am I being detained? Trent paused. No, but then I'm not going anywhere, she said, calmly but clearly. I'm a verified account holder here, and unless someone is accusing me of a crime, I will remain exactly where I am. Trent's nostrils flared. You're causing a disturbance. No, Vanessa replied, still level. You are. The tension shifted again. A few customers began murmuring. Eleanor Park, seated near the loan desk, stood up and crossed her arms. You're embarrassing yourselves, she said quietly. This woman hasn't raised her voice once. Meanwhile, you're all surrounding her like she broke in. Jason exhaled, frustrated. He pulled out his phone and made a call. Vanessa didn't need to hear both sides to know who was on the line. Kevin Rossi, Dominion's regional director. Jason stepped away to speak privately, but it didn't matter. The damage was growing by the second. Meanwhile, Cheryl and Rachel, the two tellers, whispered to each other, occasionally glancing at Vanessa with wide eyes. Rachel looked uncomfortable. Cheryl, smug. Deborah crossed her arms, lips pursed, as if daring Vanessa to escalate further. A few moments later, Jason returned, phone in hand, and put it on speaker. Mr. Rossi, I have Ms. Harper here. She's requesting a high-value transfer. She claims to be affiliated with Apex Financial Group, but there's no pre-flagged VIP status on her account. It's unusual. From the speaker, a male voice responded coldly. Then deny the request until we can escalate. If there's any suspicion of fraud, you have every right to refuse the transaction. Vanessa, still calm, still poised, took one step forward and spoke into the phone clearly. Mr. Rossi, this is Vanessa Harper. I'm the CEO of Apex Financial Group. You're authorizing your team to violate federal banking regulations in front of more than a dozen witnesses. I suggest you reconsider your tone. There was silence on the line. You could have heard a pin drop. Jason went pale. Deborah stepped back. Trent looked confused. Marcus zoomed in on his phone camera. Luis whispered, "Oh, damn." Under his breath, Kevin Rossi's voice returned, but this time, less certain. Ms. Harper, this is highly irregular. Why didn't you? Announce myself, Vanessa cut in. Because I don't have to. No customer should have to prove their worth with jewelry or designer shoes to be treated like a human being. And yet, here we are. She turned to Jason. This branch just failed a very simple test. One I designed, one your board approved, and everything that's happened here today is being documented and reviewed, internally and externally. Jason tried to respond, but nothing came out. Cheryl went pale. Rachel looked down. Trent took a half step back. The lobby had gone silent. Customers were frozen, unsure of what they were witnessing, but they knew one thing for sure. It wasn't over yet. Jason McNeil stood frozen, lips parted but silent, as if the words had been sucked out of his lungs. The phone still sat in his hand, but Kevin Rossi had already ended the call. Vanessa didn't say a word in that moment. She didn't need to. Her presence now filled the room in a different way, not because she raised her voice, but because she didn't. She turned and faced the lobby calmly, her voice clear but not angry. For those of you who are still wondering, yes, I am the CEO of Apex Financial. Yes, I came here alone. And yes, this entire encounter has been recorded, both internally and externally. Several heads turned, slowly processing what they were witnessing. Marcus Green's phone was still pointed steadily at the center of the lobby. Live streaming now. Over 300 viewers and counting, Luis Hernandez muttered. You've got half the neighborhood watching this right now, Vanessa continued. This wasn't a coincidence. I've received over a dozen complaints in the past year about how this branch treats black and brown customers. Today, I came to see for myself. Deborah Lynch took a shaky breath and tried to recover, folding her arms with forced composure. Ms. Harper, if you had made us aware of your position, this would have been handled differently. Vanessa turned her gaze on her. Exactly. And that's the problem, isn't it? Service shouldn't depend on status. Dignity isn't something you reserve for people you think are important. It's something you offer because it's the right thing to do. The teller, Rachel Knox, looked visibly shaken now. She turned to Cheryl and whispered, "She's right." Cheryl said nothing, jaw clenched and arms crossed. Officer Trent Wallace, realizing the weight of the moment, took a subtle step away from Vanessa and toward the wall, his radio still silent. From behind, Brian Cole stood and slowly walked forward. For the first time, he addressed the room. "Just for clarity, I'm part of Ms. Harper's executive protection team. Everything that happened in this lobby, from the moment she stepped inside to the racial profiling, the delay, and the false accusations, has been recorded and time-stamped. This footage will be submitted to both legal and federal oversight." At that, the man in the hoodie who had been sitting silently near the ATM raised his phone and started recording too. "Yo," he said quietly. "They really tried to play her like she was nothing. This is wild." Vanessa didn't flinch. She turned back toward the counter and retrieved her documents from her bag. Clear wire transfer paperwork, full identification, tax ID verification, and Apex's legal filing certificate. "This is what I brought in today. I followed the rules. I scheduled the appointment. I complied with every request. And yet, I was treated like a criminal." She turned toward Jason. "And now, Mr. McNeil, I have a few questions for you." Jason tried to stand straighter, sweat now forming visibly on his collar. "Yes, ma'am," he said, suddenly meek. "On what grounds did you delay the transaction?" Vanessa asked evenly. It wasn't flagged as a VIP profile, so your reasoning was based solely on appearance?" she interrupted. Jason hesitated. "No, it's standard protocol for that you don't apply to white customers," she finished. "I watched 3 other individuals come in after me with no appointments, no hesitation, and walk out with smiles on their faces." She pointed to Eleanor Park, who was now standing near the front. "Ms. Park, would you mind sharing what you witnessed?" Eleanor nodded and spoke gently but firmly. "She was ignored, delayed, and asked for identification twice when others weren't. I've banked here 10 years. I've never been treated that way." Louise stepped forward. "I second that. I saw 2 guys get handshakes and fast service. Then I saw her get interrogated," Deborah snapped. "This is being blown out of proportion." But Jason raised his hand, silencing her. His voice cracked slightly. "Ms. Harper, what happens now?" Vanessa paused. The silence returned, thick and watchful. Then she reached into her bag again and pulled out a red folder. Apex's formal partnership agreement with Dominion Bank, complete with performance audits, anti-bias compliance terms, and executive-level oversight clauses. She laid it gently on the counter in front of Jason. "Now," she said quietly, "this branch is being placed under formal review, effective immediately. All transactions are frozen, no deposits, no withdrawals, no internal transfers until Apex's executive team clears your operations for compliance." Someone gasped quietly from the lobby. Cheryl's face went pale. Trent instinctively stepped forward, then stopped himself. Jason's hands hovered over the papers. "Ma'am, please, this would devastate our daily operations." Then maybe, Vanessa replied. You should have thought about that before assuming a black woman couldn't possibly be who she said she was. At that moment, the front doors opened again. A news reporter stepped in, followed by a cameraman. Marcus had posted the live stream link to a local news tip line. The reporter glanced around, microphone in hand. Is Ms. Harper here? Vanessa looked over and gave a polite nod. You might want to wait just a few more minutes, she said. This isn't over yet. Jason staggered back slightly. Ms. Harper, please, I'm begging you. This was a mistake. A huge mistake. No, Vanessa replied calmly. This was a culture you allowed to thrive, and it's time someone shut the door on it. She turned and walked to the center of the lobby, standing under the Dominion Bank logo in full view of every camera and every customer. This is what financial dignity looks like. Not shouting, not chaos, just the quiet refusal to be dismissed. And with that, the branch fell into complete silence, except for the faint sound of notification chimes as Marcus's live stream crossed 10,000 viewers in real time. Jason McNeil stood behind the counter, visibly trembling now, staring at the red Apex folder like it was a live grenade. Every eye in the lobby was on him, yet none carried sympathy. Behind him, Deborah clutched a tablet in her hands, scrolling anxiously through company policies she clearly hadn't read in years. Cheryl looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. Meanwhile, Vanessa Harper remained exactly where she was, centered, still, and in control. She didn't need to raise her voice, because the facts were louder than anything she could shout. She slowly turned the folder toward the camera and opened to a page clearly marked Dominion Bank, Lincoln Heights Branch Oversight Agreement. The seal of Apex Financial sat in the corner of the page. This, she said clearly, is the compliance agreement that governs every one of Apex's partnership branches. That includes this one. She paused long enough for the cameras to capture the bold print. Apex Financial reserves the right to suspend operations or initiate audit procedures at any partnered branch showing evidence of bias, misconduct, or regulatory failure. She looked back at Jason. You signed this personally last year, page 7. Jason blinked rapidly. Ms. Harper, I wasn't aware this visit was part of any audit. Vanessa nodded once. Exactly. That's what makes it valid. From the rear of the lobby, Brian Cole stepped forward again and handed Jason a small envelope. Legal delivery. Internal audit begins today. Signed by Apex Financial General Counsel Andre Fields. Jason hesitated, took the envelope with both hands, and opened it slowly. His lips moved as he read, eyes widening with every line. Deborah leaned over to read with him. Her face went pale. You're shutting us down? She asked, almost whispering. Vanessa turned to her, voice still composed. Temporarily, pending full compliance review. That includes staff behavior, client handling procedures, and bias training protocols, none of which were followed today. Cheryl Madsen suddenly stepped forward, her voice shaking. I didn't mean to be rude. I was just following what I'd seen others do. I thought she. Vanessa held up a hand, gently but firmly. This isn't about you thinking. It's about what you chose to ignore. You don't need to raise your voice to humiliate someone. Sometimes silence does the job just fine. Rachel Knox, the younger teller who had stayed quiet throughout, now stepped out from behind the desk. She looked directly at Vanessa. I'm sorry, she said, voice low but clear. I knew something was wrong. I should have spoken up. Vanessa nodded slowly. Then let this be a lesson you don't forget. Just then, the glass doors opened again, and in walked a man in a gray tailored suit, mid-50s, briefcase in hand, calm and unreadable. Jason seemed to deflate at the sight of him. Andre, he muttered. You're already here. Andre Fields, General Counsel for Apex, gave Jason a hard look before turning to Vanessa. Ma'am, everything has been confirmed. Audit team is en route. Media protocols are in effect. Would you like to proceed with public notification? Or keep it internal for now? Vanessa looked around the lobby, saw the cameras, saw the faces, some shocked, some ashamed, and a few quietly proud. She spoke plainly. We proceed publicly. No more silence. No more hiding behind procedures that only apply to certain people. Andre gave a single nod and stepped aside. Behind him, a team of 3 Apex staff members entered with briefcases and tablets, immediately splitting into zones. 2 began taking photos. 1 pulled transaction logs. Deborah looked panicked. This is a full takeover? Andre replied without looking at her. This is an accountability procedure. If you did your job correctly, you'll be fine. But the weight in his voice suggested he already knew the answer. Officer Trent Wallace, who had kept himself near the exit, stepped forward. Do I need to remain on site for crowd control? Vanessa shook her head. No, but I do expect a written report from your security firm regarding use of force protocols, profiling complaints, and why a paying client was approached before any offense occurred. Trent nodded slowly. Understood. Then quietly walked out. Radio still silent. Marcus Green, still live streaming, whispered toward his phone. She just took over the bank. Y'all, on camera. She shut it down in real time. His viewer count jumped to 35,000. Local news vans were now visible through the front windows. Luis Hernandez turned to Vanessa. Do you want us to clear out? Give you space? Vanessa smiled softly, the first sign of warmth in 20 minutes. No, she said. Stay. You deserve to witness this. You were here for the disrespect. Be here for the correction. Eleanor Park gave a quiet nod. We'll stay. Jason lowered his eyes and asked, almost childlike. Ms. Harper, what happens to us now? Vanessa let the question hang. Then she answered in full. That depends on what you do next. We'll be reviewing every customer interaction for the past 12 months. Every complaint, every incident swept under the rug. You can participate, or you can step aside, but what you can't do anymore is pretend this never happened. Jason swallowed hard. Cheryl stepped back without a word. Deborah walked into her office and closed the door. Rachel remained at the desk, standing straight. Vanessa finally exhaled, slow and steady, like she had been holding that breath since she walked through the door. 15 minutes ago, she said softly, you questioned whether I belonged here. Now I decide who does. And with that, she turned to Andre. Let's begin the shutdown. And as the lights above the teller counters dimmed and the temporarily closed sign was placed on the entrance, the lobby of Dominion Bank's Lincoln Heights branch no longer belonged to the people who once ran it, but to the woman they tried to humiliate. Within the hour, the news had spread far beyond the walls of the Lincoln Heights branch. By the time Vanessa Harper stepped outside, the sidewalk was lined with news vans, reporters holding microphones, and onlookers from nearby shops craning their necks to see the woman who had just shut down a bank without raising her voice. Marcus Green's live stream had passed 80,000 viewers and was now trending on social media under the tag Bank Bias Exposed. Clips of Jason's stammering apology, Deborah's cold dismissal, and Vanessa's calm declaration. Now I decide who belongs, had already circulated to millions of phones and inboxes. Inside the branch, the Apex audit team worked in silence, scanning files, reviewing customer complaints, and logging timestamps. Tasha Bell, the quiet black employee who had stood frozen during the confrontation, now found herself stepping up, assisting the auditors, guiding them through digital systems, answering questions with a newfound sense of duty. Rachel Knox, still behind the counter, began packing up her station quietly. She had asked to stay and assist with the transition. Cheryl Madsen, however, was nowhere to be seen. Deborah Lynch had locked her office from the inside and refused to speak to anyone. Jason McNeil remained in his chair at the manager's desk, head in his hands. Outside, Vanessa stood calmly as reporters shouted her name. One voice finally rose above the rest. "Ms. Harper, what made you come to this specific branch?" Vanessa looked directly into the nearest camera. "We'd received 14 documented complaints in the last 12 months, she said simply. Each one involved a Black or Latino client being denied service, delayed, or treated with suspicion. So I decided to see what was happening with my own eyes." Another reporter called out, "Did you plan to shut them down today?" Vanessa paused. "No, but I was prepared to." The crowd quieted. She continued, "When people say discrimination doesn't exist anymore, I think of places like this, where it's not always loud, but it's always there. It shows up in who gets helped first, who gets questioned, and who gets accused of fraud just for asking for their own money." From behind the cameras, Luis Hernandez stepped forward and raised his hand slightly. Vanessa noticed him and gave a small nod. "I was there," he said to the reporters. "She was calm the whole time, never raised her voice, never cursed. She just stood there while they judged her from the moment she walked in." Eleanor Park, standing beside him, added, "They assumed she didn't belong because of how she looked, not because of anything she did." The reporters began scribbling furiously. Across town, Dominion Bank's headquarters was already in crisis mode. Kevin Rossi, the regional director who had approved the phone denial earlier, was now the subject of a formal review. Internal documents had surfaced, emails suggesting he instructed staff to apply elevated fraud screening to clients without established visual indicators of affluence, a phrase that quickly drew public outrage. Dominion's stock price began to drop, inch by inch. By late afternoon, it had lost nearly 6% of its value. Shareholders demanded an emergency statement. Vanessa, meanwhile, was back at her downtown office, seated in a quiet corner conference room overlooking the Atlanta skyline. Brian Cole stood outside, managing incoming messages. Andre Fields reviewed legal documents while Apex's media team fielded interview requests from CNN, MSNBC, and even BBC World News. Still dressed in the same navy blouse and slacks she wore that morning, Vanessa remained calm, reflective, and firm. She didn't celebrate. She didn't boast. She simply sat in quiet contemplation, already thinking about what came next. "Ma'am," Andre said gently, "media's asking for a formal statement by morning. Do you want to write it yourself?" Vanessa nodded. "Yes. I want them to hear it in my words." She stood and walked to the window. The city below continued moving, cars honking, people laughing, life going on. But something had shifted, something irreversible. She turned back to Andre. "Also," she said, "I want to send a letter to every client who filed a complaint with that branch. I want them to know they were heard." Andre nodded. "We'll draft it tonight." Moments later, Vanessa received a text from Marcus Green. It read, "You showed us how to fight with dignity. Thank you." She smiled, only slightly. Then her phone buzzed again, this time from the head of Apex's board. A short message. "What you did today will define this company's future. Let's talk in the morning." As the sun began to set over Atlanta, Dominion Bank released a short press statement admitting a failure in branch-level professionalism and announcing the immediate resignation of Regional Director Kevin Rossi. The statement did not name Vanessa, it did not apologize, but by then, It didn't matter. The footage spoke for itself. The silence in the lobby spoke for itself. And Vanessa Harper? She had spoken clearly enough. Back at the now darkened Lincoln Heights branch, the Apex audit team finished sealing the teller drawers and server access. A red and white notice had been posted on the door. This branch is closed for internal review. Inside, only 2 employees remained, Tasha Bell and Rachel Knox. They stood by the front windows, watching the crowds outside. Tasha turned to Rachel. "You think we'll get to stay?" Rachel shrugged. "I think she knows who was part of the problem, and who wasn't." Tasha looked back at the entrance. She didn't raise her voice once. She whispered. Rachel nodded. She didn't have to. She already owned the building. They just didn't know it yet. And as night fell over Lincoln Heights, the building sat quiet, emptied of authority, but filled with a lesson no one inside would forget. Vanessa Harper had walked in like anyone else. She left as the woman who reminded them that power doesn't need to announce itself. It just has to show up and stay standing. The next morning, the press gathered outside Apex Financial's headquarters, waiting quietly for the woman who had become a national headline overnight. The footage of Vanessa Harper shutting down a bank branch had now surpassed 10 million views across platforms. News anchors replayed her words on loop. Editorials questioned how many other branches might be operating under the same unspoken bias. Hashtags like bank bias exposed, she shut it down, and Vanessa Harper were trending across the country, but inside the building. Vanessa sat alone for a few final moments before stepping into the light, dressed in a charcoal gray suit with a soft cream blouse. Her hair pulled back. She reviewed her notes one last time, not because she needed to memorize them, but because every word mattered. At exactly 9 a.m., she stepped to the podium before a sea of cameras, microphones, and silent expectation. She didn't begin with anger. She began with clarity. "Yesterday, I walked into a branch of a bank that claims to serve all communities equally," she said. "I did not raise my voice. I did not demand special treatment. I simply waited for the service I was promised and received judgment instead." She let the words hang. This wasn't an isolated event. It was a pattern, one many have experienced, but few have had the power to confront directly. I didn't go in to test them as a CEO. I went in as a black woman, and that was all it took to be treated like a threat. The room remained silent except for the clicking of cameras. Vanessa continued. "Let me be clear. What happened yesterday wasn't extraordinary. What was extraordinary is that, for once, it happened to someone with the power to do something about it. And so I did." She lifted a paper from the podium. "Effective immediately. Apex Financial has suspended all contracts with Dominion Bank pending a full institutional audit. We will be offering all clients at the affected branch a direct transfer option to our internal services with enhanced protections and public transparency." She looked up. "But this isn't just about Dominion. It's about every system that still quietly calculates someone's worth based on the color of their skin, the way they dress, or how their name sounds on paper." Behind her, a screen lit up with a bold headline, "The Dignity Initiative, launching July 15th. Vanessa gestured to it. "We're launching a national program focused on financial equity, customer protection, and internal bias accountability across all Apex partners. And we'll be offering open-door hiring for former employees who were overlooked, unheard, or silenced by the very systems they worked within." She paused. "Because we're not just shutting down broken branches. We're building something better in their place." The audience sat in stunned silence for a few moments before the first round of applause broke. It was quiet at first, then grew, first among staff, then reporters, then everyone in the room. But Vanessa didn't smile. She wasn't there to take a bow. She stepped down from the podium quietly, walked through the back corridor, and returned to her office. She didn't need the world's approval. She had something better, the knowledge that the next time someone walked into a bank like she did, they might finally be seen for who they are, not who someone else assumes them to be. 2 weeks later, the Dominion Bank Lincoln Heights branch remained closed, its once busy lobby now quiet, blinds drawn, and a bright red placard on the door that read, "Under Federal Review." But while the building sat in silence, the ripple effects of Vanessa Harper's stand had grown louder with every passing day. Nationwide, customers began sharing their own banking horror stories, some eerily similar, others even worse. Apex Financial saw a 30% spike in new account inquiries from communities of color. Financial institutions across the country scrambled to issue public diversity statements and launch internal reviews, hoping to avoid the fate Dominion had just suffered. But Vanessa wasn't focused on headlines anymore. Instead, she poured her attention into building something lasting. She met with community leaders, held roundtables with local bank tellers and small business owners, and launched a mentorship program for young Black professionals entering finance. She called it the Dignity Fellowship, named not after her experience, but after what had been denied to her, and so many others, until someone finally said, "Enough," on a quiet Monday morning. Vanessa returned to Lincoln Heights, not for a press conference, but to walk the street as a citizen again. The newly renovated branch, now under Apex management, had reopened with an entirely new staff and a new name, the Apex Community Financial Center. Gone were the tinted windows and cold marble floors. In their place stood warm lighting, local artwork, and an open-door lobby designed to feel welcoming rather than guarded. At the front desk stood a familiar face, Tasha Bell, promoted to branch leader. She wore a navy blazer, modest jewelry, and a look of quiet pride. When she saw Vanessa walk in, her eyes lit up. "Ms. Harper," she said softly. "Welcome back." Vanessa smiled, extended her hand. "Looks like you made the place your own." Tasha nodded. "We're trying to earn trust, one day at a time." Vanessa looked around the room, saw a young man getting help opening his first business account, an elderly woman laughing with a teller, a bilingual sign on the wall that read, "Respect is our first policy." She felt something she hadn't felt in that building before, peace. As she turned to leave, she paused at the door and looked back, not to admire, but to remember, and not just for herself, but for everyone who'd ever been told. "Are you sure you belong here?" Outside, the same man who had once live-streamed her humiliation, Marcus Green, was now working with Apex's outreach team, filming a short documentary called More Than a Client. He raised his camera and caught a brief glimpse of her smile as she walked past. No speeches, no microphones, just a woman, standing in her truth, and walking into her legacy, across the country. Her story had inspired new legislation, new corporate guidelines, and new conversations around dignity in public spaces. But to Vanessa, none of that compared to what she'd heard from one woman in a handwritten letter. It read, "I've been invisible at banks for years. After watching you, I walked into my local branch today with my head up. For the first time, they looked me in the eyes. Thank you." Vanessa kept that letter in her desk drawer, not as a trophy, but as a reminder that some revolutions don't begin with shouting or fire. Some begin with a quiet refusal to step back, and that sometimes, the most powerful voice in the room is the one that simply says, "I'm not leaving." Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And remember, dignity doesn't ask for permission. It stands firm, even in silence. Until next time, stay strong, stay aware, and stay human.